Good morning and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Audrey LaRue with Lexmark, and I will be your moderator today. We look forward to spending the next 45 minutes with you discussing CloudFax. But let me begin by sharing an industry quote. The impending obsolescence of analog phone lines will create a wave of issues and problems for businesses that still rely on this technology. Businesses should act now to avoid problems supporting services like elevators, alarm panels, and business-critical devices like fax machines. We will spend some time today addressing this topic, and we'll hear from several guest speakers. First, we'll hear from industry expert Jason Blackswell, who is the Research Director in SMB Communication Services at IDC. In his role, Jason develops analysis and thought leadership in this rapidly evolving network of bundled telephony, broadband, video, and wireless services. He also provides end-user technology trends and service provider strategies for SMB communications and networking requirements. We'll also hear from Ken Romo, who is the Director of Worldwide Sales at etherFax. After working with countless Fortune 100 companies around the world, he has gained extensive knowledge on how to evaluate and integrate new technologies into mission-critical operations that streamline the enterprise. And over the past 20 years, he's designed and implemented some of the world's largest electronic document transfer systems with an emphasis on security, efficiency, and robustness. We look forward to hearing from both of these industry experts today. But before we get started, just as a reminder, if you have any questions during the discussion, please submit them using the chat feature. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So Jason, thank you for joining us today. We'd like to kick this off by asking a critical question. What are the issues you're seeing in the market from a telephony perspective that organizations should be on the lookout for?
Well, yeah, thank you, Audrey, and thank you to Lexmark for inviting me to speak with all of you today. So let me start to answer your question by saying that it's actually a very exciting time in the world of telephony and connectivity. You know, we're in this era that has really accelerated over the last 3 or 4 years, where there are so many technologies and services that have emerged that are keeping businesses connected with customers and engaged with their customers. They're keeping employees connected to each other. So there's a lot of exciting things that are developing in this space. But there's also something that's looming out there that really will have an impact on a lot of businesses. And a lot of businesses may not even be aware that they need to be thinking about this problem and acting to avoid issues down the road, as you mentioned in the quote. And what I'm talking about today is the impending copper sunset. So, you know, while that sounds like something beautiful to look at, what we're actually talking here is the obsolescence of the legacy copper line infrastructure. And that's the infrastructure that has delivered telephony and connectivity to businesses and consumers for decades. But for many years now, businesses have been migrating from these copper lines, or as some of you may know them as POTS lines, the plain old telephone system, and they've been transitioning these lines over to internet-based phone solutions. And many of you are probably familiar with other terms like VoIP or voice over IP. And those are the kind of the newer technologies, right, that businesses have been migrating to. And so there's been this very long trend of this migration for many, many years. And this decline in the legacy lines that are in use across the United States. But what's kind of shocking is that, you know, we're here in 2023, almost 2024 now, and there are still millions of these legacy lines still in use by businesses of all sizes. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the migration has really been allowed to happen organically in the past. So what I mean is that, you know, lines were migrated when customers decided that they wanted to make that transition and investment. And had to really sort of actively, you know, make that decision and go out and demand that. So in other words, it wasn't forced on customers by the telcos, but was driven by customer demand. And so a lot of businesses went out, they made those investments, embraced the new technologies and moved. But there's a lot of businesses out there that haven't. And so that's now what's creating some of the problems that we anticipate over the coming years. And so, what's different now and what's driving this urgency is that we're seeing some factors that have evolved that are impacting and disrupting legacy lines. So the first thing I'd like to point out is that there's regulatory factors that are making it easier now for the telcos to go out and shut down the legacy networks that they have in place. The FCC has been actively working on reducing regulations that have forced the telcos to maintain these networks. And everyone's probably seen a number of headlines focused on this over the last couple of years. In one of the FCC publications, in fact, they actually stated that the legacy regulatory obligations, and I'm quoting here, have become a vice, trapping incumbent LECs, that's the phone companies, into preserving outdated technologies and services at the cost of a slower transition to next generation networks and services that benefit American consumers and businesses, end of quote. So clearly the FCC is taking a position that legacy networks are holding back businesses and that more needs to be done to migrate these customers. On the other side of things, there's also been some changes in the regulations that have allowed the telcos to spend less money on maintaining these networks. And so that's created some issues with reliability and quality. And those used to be hallmarks of the copper line networks. They were always considered to be reliable, robust. They would work in almost any case, and even if there were storms and bad weather, all those kinds of things. But as an example of these issues, the California Public Utility Commission commissioned a study to examine and evaluate the telecommunication networks and policies and practices of AT&T and Frontier in California. And the findings of that study concluded that overall service quality had been deteriorating. The incumbent telcos had disinvested in their networks, especially in rural and low-income areas. And there was a failure to adapt the network infrastructure to remain resilient during these inclement weather conditions. And so, this study only covered the networks in California, but it's easy reasonable to think that those similar quality and reliability issues exist across other suppliers across the U.S. On the other side, telcos are really becoming more proactive about migrating these customers. We're seeing them decommissioning the copper line networks. And one of the things that's really been taking place is increasing prices for the customers that remain. And this is because, you have a declining market, you have increasing costs to maintain the smaller number of customers, and this is increasing pressure on those telcos. And we've heard examples of pricing increasing to hundreds of dollars per month and even thousands of dollars per month for a single legacy line. And I'll just quickly show an example of what we see in the market here. So the blue line shows the decline in lines. And over the last 5 years, we've seen the number of lines cut in more than by half. So by the end of this year, there'll be about 10 million business legacy lines still in existence in the US. The purple line on this chart illustrates the price on those lines. And if we index that to 2018 and look at the trend, you can see that already by this year, we're close to 25% higher in pricing for those lines. And by 2027, be 40 to 45% higher than prices were in 2018. And this may even accelerate further based on some of those market conditions that I mentioned.
So Jason, it sounds like it's going to have a real impact on the market. What types of businesses should be concerned about the copper sunset?
Yeah, so the reality is, any business that still has legacy copper line telephone systems in place will be impacted by this. As I mentioned, we see the cost increasing tremendously. So that's a burden on businesses of all sizes, whether you're small or large. And then those reliability issues that I mentioned. Again, you want to be able to stay connected to your customers, have your employees stay connected, and you can't really deal with those reliability kinds of issues for these lines. But it's especially important for those businesses that have specialty lines. So, if you're talking about things like elevator lines, fire panels, alarm panels, those blue light public safety phones, all of those kinds of things use analog phone lines. And the one thing that that we want to talk about today, which a lot of people kind of forget about, that is there's still millions of these in place, is fax machines. And so that really affects some very specific industries that rely on those fax machines. So we look at things like the healthcare industry, banking and finance, the insurance industry, and even things like retail, manufacturing, and of course, government and public sector, where there are a lot of those fax lines still in place.
So, Jason, all that being said, what should these businesses be doing today to prepare for the obsolescence of the legacy phone lines?
Yeah, so as we advise our clients and talk to technology business decision makers out there among small and mid-sized businesses and even large enterprises, we think it's tremendously important that you start to plan and prepare for this. You really need to assess your current business phone systems. Look at your future requirements. What do you need to have in place to support your business going forward? And especially, as I mentioned, don't forget about those specialty lines like fax machines and the other specialty lines that I talked about, because a lot of times those are just sort of there and they're working and you're not really thinking about them a lot of times. These investments really need to be prioritized as well. We know that businesses are looking at cloud and AI and all of these hot topics, but telephony and voice services and fax machines are as important, if not more important. So prioritizing those investments is extremely important, and putting them into the roadmap for your IT investments. And then we think that most businesses really should be looking at partnering and finding a technology partner to make these transitions. Because finding that right technology partner is going to help you guide that system assessment that I talked about. And then, for these specialty lines, it's extremely important that you meet any regulatory requirements that are in place for things like healthcare or banking and finance. You need to, your partner can help you maximize that investment and focus on future-proofing the investment so that it's scalable and can meet your future needs for your business. They can advise you on feature sets that are available because you may not be aware of all of the features that are available in these new technologies. And then they'll help you make that migration as smooth as possible.
Well, Jason, thank you. Appreciate the content you just shared. And we hope this was insightful and gave you a really good perspective on the market. There are many factors that may influence you to make a change to your fax environment. And today we're going to make you aware of two primary things. One, the overall fax portfolio that Lexmark offers, and two, our long-standing relationship and solution with etherFax. So the chart you're seeing right here represents the support and the capability we have with the leading premise and cloud-based fax platforms in the market today. And as you can see, we have many ways of snapping into your environment if you're already standardized on a platform. The integrations are robust, they're easy to implement and to manage. And in addition, Lexmark resells many of these platforms, so they can be a one-stop shop for the needs that you have for your fax environment. Now, it's important to note that there are some industries that have standardized on certain platforms, and Lexmark can work in those environments, and they can provide an end-to-end approach to help your organizations to avoid current and future changes that we just talked about in the telecom space. Many of which are going to create significant cost increases and an urgent need to change technology in a short period of time. I also want to note that these platforms can be sold and delivered through our channel partners. So if you're one of our valued channel partners, we can work with you and your customers in helping to solve their fax challenges. So with that, I'm going to shift our attention to our strategic partner, etherFax, and introduce Ken Romo, who will take us through the etherFax platform and educate you on how it works, the significant benefits, the seamless integration it has with Lexmark equipment. In fact, there is an integration embedded directly into the Lexmark firmware, which makes implementation with etherFax take mere minutes, and Ken will talk about that. So Ken, thanks for joining us today. And just to keep this conversation going, if you could start, By giving us your position on those FCC changes that we just talked about, coming from a fax provider in the market.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Audrey. And Jason, thank you very much for that valuable information. And Lexmark, thank you very, very much for allowing etherFax to join on this presentation. As I go through the presentation, I'd like everyone to take away 3 factors here. First off, remember when I'm covering all the solutions that etherFax has with Lexmark, Lexmark has the ability, the scar tissue, the knowledge, and everything to provide all etherFax solutions. And to that fact, you know, today Lexmark probably has half a dozen POCs in different verticals where we are implementing this solution. They have customers that I will discuss that have it in place already. The other point I'd like everyone to take away is the incredible ROI that's available with our solution. And lastly, we have a methodology here at etherFax that we call crawl, walk, run. So when we present our solutions, we're not going to say to you, you have to rip and replace. So we can incrementally scale to any solution that potential customers might have. So to answer the question, you know, the FCC, we know there's an urgency. These fax lines, these analog fax lines are going away. So for the last 9 years, we've been working with Lexmark. And to your point, Audrey, Lexmark and their MFP devices has direct API integration. And I know there's probably some of you have heard my spiel before, but I always say it's the only integration of its type in the world. And I'll discuss that here in the next slide. But again, sending a fax through etherFax, you know, we have Lexmark at the firmware level that's connected directly to etherFax. But any fax server out there, I've been asked to talk about WriteFax specifically and how we can integrate that and how Lexmark can provide that solution. But we have API direct integrations. We're the only certified Microsoft Teams application. And then we do have a hybrid middleware, Eris. And Eris, just so you know, is we know that not everybody has Lexmark devices. So Lexmark has the ability to integrate into etherFax with a mixed fleet as well. And again, later on in my presentation, I'll go into detail on that. But again, as you can see, you know, along with all these other integration points, I put Lexmark in here because it does have a direct integration directly into etherFax. So I like to put this slide up because, you know, what does that mean from a business perspective? And say, you know, you do have a Lexmark device. etherFax has an ecosystem, and we have what we call a secure exchange network. We are the only provider that, for instance, you walk up to your Lexmark device, you put in the paper, you hit the button. If it's connected to etherFax, it can deliver to any of these entities, to a fax server. It can deliver to WriteFax. It can deliver to BizCom. All these different types of environments. And if they're on the endpoint, which etherFax has millions of endpoints, it goes at the speed of the internet with 100% reliability in a mixed environment. So we like to say we're the Switzerland of the cloud service out there. So again, you know, all our integration points allows us to have this unique platform where we're the data company and the telephone company. So that's what allows us to do this. So again, probably about 9 years ago, we started working with Lexmark with the integration into the device. So again, all Lexmark MFP devices 2010 and later have the firmware capability of integrating into etherFax. Now, there's a lot of advantages to this, and just so you know, the configuration on it is it's literally a drop down with the latest firmware where you can select, you know, the analog copper lines or choose etherFax. Again, you know, to Jason's point, these are going away. So just so you know, on a daily basis, we are converting Lexmark devices, pulling what we like to say, cutting the wire, and putting them on the etherFax network. Now, again, when I talk about fax, I always talk about inbound and outbound fax. So the Lexmark integration at the firmware level with etherFax makes this device, I like to say, one of the most powerful fax appliances in the world. And I'll tell you why. On the inbound side, you can literally put thousands of fax DIDs on it. And a Lexmark device has the ability to do what I call inbound routing. So any of those numbers that are dialed, the Lexmark utilities allow you to send it to a network drive, to an email user. You can print it, so you have full access to where that fax is going to land. Also, because etherFax has a never busy network, you can take one of these devices that has a fax number 555-1212, and we etherFax can answer literally hundreds of simultaneous calls for that one device. And then when the device calls into etherFax, we will deliver all those faxes, and you decide how they're going to be sent. So again, a lot of functionality on this device. On the outbound side, there's no user training that's required. You literally put in the piece of paper, punch in the fax number, hit the go button, and it's delivered right out of there through our exchange network. Also, it has the ability with the Lexmark utilities to do what we call a print to fax feature. So if need be, you don't even have to walk to the device. Again, being in this business for years, I have never seen its equal. It truly is a very sophisticated integration piece in the ability to replace these copper lines. The other thing that it does is, when we talk about etherFax, I always say security, security, security. I have a slide on that, so I'm going to say it again. I'll probably say it many more times. But these faxes that are going to be transported are secure end to end. So you can know that whatever you're sending is secure. And then, why are we even talking about fax today? So just so you know, in the healthcare space, faxing is a growing number. It's not declining. They send billions and billions of faxes a year. And 78% of all clinical communications about patients' medical records is still done via fax today. So again, it's still very, very relevant. And again, we have a great solution for Lexmark devices with etherFax. The other thing I'd like to mention that's different than any of our competitors here is we are my internet connection.
And we got a little nervous. We thought Jason and I were going to have to start singing.
So again, apologize. etherFax has been working with Lexmark now for the last about 9 years, and we've embedded etherFax right into the firmware of Lexmark. And again, it's the only type of its integration in the world. Whenever I talk about faxing, I always talk about inbound and outbound. On the inbound side, I'm telling you, this device with the etherFax at the firmware makes it probably one of the most powerful fax appliances out there in the market. And I've seen every flavor of fax, every provider, etc. So on the inbound side, etherFax has what we call a never busy network. So on that device, say for instance, you have 555-1212 as a fax number. etherFax can answer multiple calls, literally hundreds of simultaneous calls. So there's never capacity or worry of a busy signal on the inside. Once the device calls back to etherFax, all those faxes will be delivered. And again, on the outbound side, we have what we call a real-time network. So all of our competitors, they have what they call a store and forward technology. So whenever they get that fax, they'll queue it up in their system, and whenever they have an available port, they'll send it out. So again, we have a real-time network. We have a never busy network. There's no user change to the workflow. It works identical. It looks like it's connected to a copper line. And then again, it's secure. So we always talk about security, security, security with etherFax. So that is built in. It's encrypted end to end. It's highly available. It's disaster recovery proof. We also have what we call dynamic numbers assigned to the portal. So say you have an environment with 10 remote locations, 10 devices, that location happened to go down, that device is not available, or that facility burns down, for instance, you can go into our portal and assign that fax number to another device or to an email or a Teams account, whatever the case may be. And again, on the inbound side, these Lexmark devices have a lot of functionality. You can literally put hundreds of fax DID numbers on them, and it has the ability to route it to an email address, a network drive, whatever the case may be. So again, it's very, very scalable and very, very effective in managing these devices throughout your network. And so just so you know, again, because of our integration with the Lexmark, and we're at the firmware level, we can support high resolution color faxes, again, at the speed of the internet. And the reason I like to show this slide, because Lexmark and etherFax can extend the workflow, if you will. So you can expect these types of faxes to come into your environment. So you see the forms on the left-hand side. So etherFax has another technology called Weave. And what Weave does is it does OCR, data extraction, searchable PDFs. And yes, we're working with the AI technology. So when you get these faxes, Lexmark and etherFax can extend this workflow. So again, when I'm talking about etherFax and Lexmark, I started off with saying, Lexmark has the ability to sell all these solutions. One of the points I wanted you to take away was the ROI. So Lexmark has rolled out to a large global clinic service, thousands of integrations into etherFax. And you can see the numbers here. They're pretty self-explanatory. But in the first 2 months, their return on investment was met. In the first year, they're saving over $1 million. And that's mainly because of the cost of the analog lines. We just had our partner summit recently. We actually have a customer, a partner there who said their customers were paying over $500 per month per analog line. Anyhow, again, Lexmark has the ability to do this. They have functionality that when you roll these out, so again, I know that a lot of your customers and a lot of customers on the line today probably have WriteFax. I spent 17 years there. I actually went to high school with the guy who invented it. But we have the only real-time connector for a WriteFax server. So just like I explained the goodness of the Lexmark device, we can do the same thing with WriteFax. So up in the upper right-hand corner where it says existing telco, I can't emphasize enough, the cost with that, the support with that. etherFax does not do any fax over IP. We all do all TEM connections. So we have the fastest, most.
I apologize. It looks like we've lost Ken again. He's having networking issues. Apparently, he's lost connection twice now. Jason, I have a question for you while we wait for Ken to come back to us. Back to your cost slide, is the cost represented per year or per month, and is it per line?
Yeah, so the chart there was showing it's basically an annual cost, but what I was doing was indexing that to 2018. So considering 2018 as a 100% and then looking at the percentage change relative to that. But yeah, we're seeing, significant increases on a monthly basis. And as Ken said, paying hundreds of dollars per month is not unheard of these days for these analog lines.
Again, I apologize. Am I back, Audrey?
We can hear you, yes. Okay. It's all right, you're not on video. That might help the connection.
Yeah, I took that off, so I apologize. So did I get through the WriteFax?
We lost you towards the end.
Okay. I know we're running up against a timer as well, so I'll kind of speed it up here. Again, the point I want to make about WriteFax is we do have a direct connection that you can connect WriteFax. They have a methodology called a dock transport. So you can connect one of your dock transports to etherFax and get the same functionality that I explained, the never busy network, dynamic number allocation, the real-time delivery, as well as the heartbeat notification. So again, what we see in our crawl, walk, run is that usually people rip out all the telephony because that's really where most of the support issues are, put in etherFax, and most of those support issues go away. So again, if you're looking to move your WriteFax infrastructure with your Lexmark devices to etherFax, we have that technology as well. Another service we have is the etherFax remote integration service. Now, what that is that's a hybrid service, and it originally started as the etherFax remote module integration, which WriteFax has, which is facsimile command language. So we can take this module and anything that's plugged into WriteFax on the production side, because this is how we do production fax. We've been talking about the Lexmark devices, and again, Lexmark has the ability to roll out all these solutions so that, any of your customers, and I know your potential customers now have production fax. We can use this, and I'm not sure if you heard, but we can do this with mixed fleets as well. is use the ERIS integration. It is a certified EPIC integration. So just so you know, it's enterprise proven. We have large healthcare organizations that are sending millions and millions of pages through the ERIS integration. We do have workflow solutions. I was asked to talk about that. And lastly, before I go through that, I know we have a lot of Canadian customers and partners. Just so you know, etherFax is a worldwide company. We have data centers throughout the world. We do have a data center in Toronto, and we can offer data sovereignty in Canada as well. So just for example, the Canadian Ministry of Health is a customer, and they had that as a requirement. So again, we can scale worldwide, and then for Canada, we can also offer data sovereignty. On the collaboration apps, as I mentioned, we are the only Microsoft Teams certified application. And then again, going back to Jason's presentation, what's happening is, you know, these copper lines are going away. A lot of enterprises are moving to Teams, not only for collaboration, but for their telephony as well. So that's where etherFax can be a solution as well. Again, we're in the Microsoft store. We also are integrated into Slack. We also have email faxing, and you know, for a while we stayed away from it, but we have figured out that now with Office 365 and Google Workspace, we can now offer the only HITRUST certified email service, and that's because we do not put any of our messaging on the outbound side over SMTP. So your messages are secure through email faxing. So keep in mind that's a solution as well. You know, again, I've talked about the network, I've talked about security, delivery features, and support billing. But, you know, on our network, as I mentioned, we have a secure exchange network, millions of endpoints. You put your Lexmark devices, any of the fax servers out there, and it allows you that goodness of you know, being able to send often with the millions of points with etherFax, not even hitting a PSTN. We're HITRUST certified, we are PCI certified, we're HIPAA certified, and these are all third-party compliance certifications, because a lot of our competition is self-audited. So we ask you to tread lightly there. I know we have federal customers. We are very, very close to being FedRAMP certified. We are telling potential customers that that should be done by Q1. We've also been told that with our other certifications like PCI, we were the first PCI level 4, that we will be the fastest FedRAMP certified company. I'm sure a lot of you in the healthcare are familiar with CLAS. We were the only 2-time rated highest service under the CLAS certification. And so, you know, you can listen to me, but this is a third party where we actually had to go out and demonstrate that we could do this functionality. And lastly, just some quick analysis where we're seeing growth in data processing is hospitals, drugstores, insurance, and primary care physicians. But by volume, it's definitely the PCPs that have the highest volume, followed by government, health services, and hospitals. And again, I apologize so much. I know my internet was going in and out. So Audrey, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ken. So we're going to move into the Q&A section. We have a few minutes left in our session here. So as a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them using the chat feature. We do have some questions that have already come in, so thank you for those. Our first question is for you, Ken. I am a certified Lexmark reseller. What is the path for me to sell etherFax in my market?
Yeah, so they would contact Lexmark directly, and then Lexmark will set them up with you know, the appropriate reseller agreement. So again, any of the certified resellers, just contact Lexmark directly, and they will help them be set up to sell any of the etherFax solutions.
Okay. Ken, this one's also for you. Given the cost of change with technology in the enterprise space, will you elaborate on what it takes to implement etherFax with Lexmark?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you know, there are different Lexmark can offer all the solutions we have, but on the devices specifically, all that's required is that the device, the MFPs 2010 and later, have internet access, have the latest firmware. We, on the etherFax side, working with Lexmark, will set up an account. And once that connection's made, you put in your serial number. There's a couple other features that you put. Once it connects, that device is ready to go. Now, the long pole in the tent, so to speak, is porting that number. We can offer a temporary number, and you can remote call forward that until that number is ported. But again, on the device side, it really just takes minutes for that configuration to take place and to connect. So it's very, very easy.
Okay. Ken, another one for you. ROI seems to be quick and very beneficial. Can you provide more details on where the savings come from?
Yeah, and as Jason pointed out, on the device side, the huge ROI is the cost of these analog lines. They're going way, way up. The other cost that's a soft cost is that on the example I gave, the large clinical customer that Lexmark has, they were having about a 2-week turnaround on support calls on those devices when those analog lines were not working. So again, the cost of doing business, these faxes not going through. A part of the ROI is that you're going to get very, very quick, successful faxes sending out of that with very to little no support required at all. But again, the big one is the telephony costs on the analog lines, whereas on the fax server side integration or any of the other integrations, again, it comes to telephony. Now, because we have HA and DR built in, you don't have to ×2 your network over there. And again, back to even on the fax server side, the number one support issue with a fax server is not the fax server itself, but the telephony. So we remove all of that from the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Ken, you talked about the Canadian support. Can you speak to where the etherFax cloud is hosted for our Canadian clients?
Yeah, that one, we domestically in Canada, we only use Equinix data centers, and that one is in Toronto. And it has all the certifications, the SOC 2. And again, any of our data centers, whereas our competition will charge for security, all of our data centers are high trust, HIPAA, and SOC 2 certified.
Okay, thank you. Ken, is etherFax agnostic or works on Lexmark devices only?
So we are agnostic. However, Lexmark is the only device that's embedded at the firmware. We can support a mixed fleet, and we have different methodologies of done it, but I spoke quickly about our Eris hybrid solution. So that's usually where they're integrated into a mixed fleet.
Okay, we've got time for just a couple more questions. Ken, what about DoD requirements for an ATO?
So we, as I mentioned, we're currently working on our FedRAMP certification. We've done a lot of the work so far. So we do have a couple candidates that are going to be our sponsors, but we're still going through that process. We are slating Q1 to have it fully certified by the end of Q1 with an ATO and everything required for FedRAMP.
Great. Okay, one last question for you, Ken. Any integration for electronic medical records, EMR software?
Yeah, so again, I know I came in and out. I can't apologize enough, but for instance, we are certified with Epic, but our Eris hybrid module allows us to integrate with any EHR. We're working on specific API integrations into those, but any EHR you may have out there, the Cerners, the NextGens, MedHawks, etc., we can integrate those into etherFax. So we do have capabilities of doing that. While in the back end, we are still currently working on API integrations with those, but those integrations are available today.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the quick response to those questions, Ken. So that is all the questions we have time for today, and this concludes our presentation. If we were unable to get to your question, we'll certainly get back to you with a response within the next couple of days. There are several documents available for download if you'd like further information on the content that was covered today. And finally, we'd really appreciate your feedback. You'll have two options to do this. One is on the webinar using the Take Survey link, or you can complete the survey via email that will be sent at the conclusion of this session. On behalf of all of us at Lexmark, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time, and have a great day.